Today I'm going to try something a bit different. For quite a few years now I've been working on a project called Rough Diamonds. It centers around people and places within a thin strip of marginally arable land on the west coast of South Africa. Within this desolate landscape there are gems to be found, both alluvial diamonds and resilient individuals who refuse to succumb to the elements. I'm keen to test how effective the YouTube video format is for simulating an exhibition. The virtual art tours that I've seen on the web still have a very clunky video game feel, but I think that Silicon Valley will eventually sort this out. I've gone for a low-tech approach to present this exhibition Walkabout. I'll talk about my motivations for producing the pictures, my approach, and hopefully some insights into the process of developing the project. Talking about one's own work can be tricky, but because I've engaged directly with some of the challenges, hopefully I'll be able to communicate some of what I've learned. When building a photographic project, at some stage one has to formulate what one's motivations are and how one wants to approach the project. I'm almost the polar opposite of a conceptual photographer. It bores me just thinking about taking photographs to illustrate or represent an idea. Visiting an art gallery, if I have to read a page of text to appreciate an artwork, I'd rather move on and find something that sparks an immediate response within me. Usually I have very little idea of what initially draws me to a subject. I've learned to trust over time I'll gain clarity by recognizing patterns within the pictures that I'm making. I find it deepens the engagement when I allow the process to develop incrementally, so not getting too OCD about it too early on. I moved to this region 3 years ago, but I've had a strong connection with the area for a long time. Gradually, I found myself becoming more accepted by the locals, and I've adapted to the way of life. Because I'm still evolving from the position of outsider to insider, I was clear that I wanted to avoid imposing judgments as much as possible. I therefore avoided any veneer of stylization in my images. My posture when photographing landscapes was straightforward, and my portraits are equally forthright. My intent was that the interaction should appear neutral in terms of any power dynamic. This also fits in with the no bullshit stance held by most of the people that live here. There's a backstory to this portrait. While walking the dogs around my village, I would often notice this man quietly reading his Bible in the outbuilding before he started work. On one occasion, I introduced myself and asked if it was okay to take a portrait. Willem Titus was quite happy and relaxed about this and went on reading. The broad environment is unremarkable and the featureless structure is visually bland. The tree lines and shadows draw one's eye towards the slither showing him inside the doorway. The picture only begins to take on meaning when we focus in on Willem. For me, the surrounding expanse of space accentuates the humility of this religious act. This makeshift partition structure was erected inside an otherwise empty store. There's something sad, jarring, and even comical about this attempt to refashion the space. But I find that the earnest, self-contained attitude of the woman challenges any position of judgment from the viewer and from me. The territory that I chose is clearly defined geographically. It stretches from above Cape Town in the south to the Namibian border in the north. To the west, it's demarcated by the sea, and to the east by the semi-desert. For most of my photographic life, apartheid and the effects of the system have influenced many of my photographic choices. In this essay, I wanted to steer clear of the country's broader social issues. During the apartheid era, there was a sense that photographers were being trivial if they didn't address these issues. The thought that one might venture into the domain of art photography was strictly verboten. The artistes, as we called them, were seen as exploitative, especially if they flirted with the political or social landscape. You can see from these black and white photographs that they are purpose-driven. This approach defined much of South African photography during the last century, but I think it also had a stifling effect on creativity. During apartheid, these two scenes of plastic swimming pools might have been used to show the contrast between the haves and the have-nots. But the approach that I've taken here places more emphasis on the inhabitants' need to survive the extreme temperatures, and also how these improvised solutions seem alien within the environment. What I found was that by removing the obligation for a purpose-driven response, space opened up for me to become more aware of aesthetic considerations like compositional elements, shape and line. I think overall my curiosity expanded as well as my sense of time. I found that I became more contemplative, exploring different levels of seeing. It's interesting that depending on how one weights one's intent, one's level of engagement modifies. It felt luxurious not feeling pressurized by time constraints. While photographing many of my previous long-term projects, circumstances often restricted prolonged contemplation. The project A City Refracted was produced over a 3-year period within the Johannesburg inner city. It required that I walk about with 3 bodyguards who would often urge me to move as quickly as possible if I stopped to take a picture. These 4 images from the essay are lyrical, but they still reflect the sense of uncertainty and volatility that I was feeling while doing the project. The inhabitants of this area seem permanently in battle against the unforgiving environment. These photographs are a record of the struggle and reflect not only the resilience of the residents, but more broadly the human instinct to improve the circumstances in which we find ourselves. Scattered throughout the landscape, there are faded markers of this attempt to tame and remodel the spaces. This photograph was taken in one of the most desolate settlements, Port Nolloth. The children's jungle gym, together with the fake grass platform, is isolated against a barren, sandy landscape. The hardened plastic structure has been weathered by wind, sand, and an almost ever-present salty sea mist. It was also erected in an unprotected public space. So because of vandalism, parts of the gym are broken and some jagged edges make it unsafe for kids to play on. I wanted all the photographs to have a cohesive look and feel. Once you've gained clarity about the direction of your project, you can establish a mood so that even though the subject matter might vary, the viewer experiences a distinct cluster of feelings when looking at the project as a whole. In the case of this essay, there are particular adjectives that one might use to describe the individual photographs throughout the whole essay. Perhaps barrenness, resolve, impermanence, and resilience. I haven't tried to instill feelings into the images. Rather, my photographic choices have been made in order to reinforce them. I chose to photograph in color because I wanted the essay to reflect the reality of everyday life. Black and white often separates the viewer from the subject, and it would have been more appropriate if I was trying to create something more conceptual or perhaps lyrical. The shot in black and white is more emotionally charged, while in color it emphasizes the juxtaposition of the strange within the ordinary. I'm showing the black and white image just to illustrate a point, while the actual image is in color. Through this essay, I'm not trying to make a statement or answer questions. Rather, it's been a process of paying attention to how I respond to what I see around me. The pictures reflect both my inner and outer landscapes. Thanks for joining me on this walkabout, and I'll see you next time.